the evidence will show, had the infinite humility, as it were, to refer to himself as Jesus Christ. The evidence will show Charles Manson to be a megalomaniac who coupled his insatiable thirst for power with an obsession for violent death.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're examining the most notorious people throughout history who have exhibited signs of sociopathy, those being antisocial behavior, manipulation, and a lack of empathy.
I was trying to help people.
Do you really believe
We
that?
had
Adolf Hitler.
If you look at somebody like Hitler, it's difficult to know what was going on in his mind, but it's possible to imagine, if you just look at dictators throughout history, that he thought he was doing good.
The mid-20th century was rife with sociopathic world leaders, including the likes of Joseph Stalin and Benito Mussolini. Naturally, Adolf Hitler is the most infamous. One could certainly make an argument that Hitler is the most evil man to ever live, showing zero remorse for the incredible suffering that he inflicted on millions of people. The Holocaust was executed with a chilling personal detachment, and he had an inflated sense of his own importance, believing that he was both a military genius and the savior of Germany. Not to mention, he was a master propagandist, using lies to manipulate the masses and craft a narrative of victimhood. Hitler is, put simply, a textbook sociopath, ticking virtually all of the requirements.
He says it's a work camp for Rona Vlunster. I'm not sure what the word means, sir. Unwanted, disliked, maybe.
Criminals?
I don't think criminals, sir.
Jeffrey Epstein.
He was here around Easter, and he rides his bicycle around, usually with the young girls, and so I have friends who saw him.
One of the most infamous financiers in modern history, Jeffrey Epstein had an extensive history of exploiting and abusing young women throughout his many years in power. His ability to exploit victims without concern for their well-being is a hallmark of sociopathic behavior, with officials identifying dozens of girls that fell victim to Epstein and his elite inner circle. And speaking of that, his ability to persuade wealthy and influential figures to associate with him suggests that he was highly skilled in deception and self-promotion, further signs of sociopathic behavior. In the end, Epstein allegedly took his own life rather than face further repercussions for his heinous crimes.
These young girls and women were subject to sexual assault, sexual exploitation through coercion, false imprisonment, where the passports at some points were taken away. The actions were just reprehensible.
Jordan Belfort.
It was a life of debauchery.
Totally.
And you smile when you say that.
Leonardo DiCaprio has enough charm and charisma to draw us into the wild life of Jordan Belfort. But make no mistake, he's a bad dude. Belfort ran Stratton Oakmont in the 1990s and ran numerous financial scams that earned him and his buddies a lot of money. Pump and dump schemes, underwriting IPOs, stock manipulation, money laundering, the list is extensive. And through these scams, Belfort defrauded thousands of people without remorse, knowingly ruining their futures while living a lavish lifestyle on their dime. And with traits like pathological lying, manipulativeness, and reckless risk-taking, Belfort shows strong signs of being a sociopath. He ultimately spent 22 months in prison and is now a writer and motivational speaker.
I've said enough about this. Let's move on.
Let me ask you this one
let's
thing.
Move on, okay? Honestly, I'm ready. I'm not going to get attacked here. You're here, so I'm done with this. Next.
I'm not attacking you.
No, but honestly,
I'm just.
You're a very nice woman, but you're starting to get to the point. It's obviously just a hatchet job here. So I'm kind of pretty much ready to move on.
Aileen Wuornos.
And now Central Florida is being threatened with news of yet another round of serial killings.
The line between psychopath and sociopath is often quite blurry, and Aileen Wuornos certainly walked that line. One of the most notorious serial killers in American history, Wuornos murdered 7 men in the late 80s and early 90s. Prosecutors successfully argued that Wuornos' primary motivation was to procure her victims' money, displaying both a premeditation for violence and a strong lack of empathy. She has also displayed a heavy degree of manipulation, having attempted to persuade the public that she killed the men in self-defense. That said, some may argue that Wuornos was more mentally ill than sociopathic, having suffered an extremely tragic upbringing that likely damaged her psyche.
Out of that spirals a life of incredible resentment, frustration, and rage. And who does she kill? She kills her father over and over and over again.
Robert William Fischer.
911 emergency. I need to report a fire.
Our house just exploded and
ignited on fire. Somebody on the way!
We went over there as fast as we could, and the yellow tape was up. We just ducked in and went down to at the end of the cul-de-sac, and then we could hear, they found one body, they found another body.
One of the most infamous unsolved crimes in modern history is that of Robert William Fischer, a Phoenix man who allegedly murdered his family and blew up the house before fleeing to the woods. Fischer has never been seen again, and at one time was on the FBI's most wanted list. Obvious lack of empathy aside, Fischer also displayed traits of manipulation and superficial charm, maintaining a public image of a devoted and charismatic family man. But the truth was far more malicious, and Fischer was known by close associates to be an abusive and controlling husband. Perhaps worst of all is his cold, premeditated calculation, committing the crime, setting the fire, and disappearing to start anew, his family the unfortunate sacrifices.
They believe there are people out there who are alive who know things that either helped Robert Fischer before or after the murders to help him escape. Now where to? We don't know. And that's what's so crazy about this whole case. That's what everybody is fascinated by.
Carla Homolka.
I think that the country, and I think that the women in this country in particular, never believed a word she said.
Canada has seen its fair share of notorious killers, including Carla Homolka. In the early 1990s, both she and her then-husband Paul Bernardo killed 3 people. Homolka's own sister Tammy was their first victim, as she asphyxiated to death after being drugged by Homolka and Bernardo. The 2 other victims, Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, were simply kidnapped off the street and murdered. But perhaps Homolka's most sociopathic trait is her manipulation, as she successfully fooled prosecutors into believing that she was coerced by Bernardo into committing the crimes. In reality, she was allegedly a willing and active participant. Her success at manipulating the justice system and receiving a favorable plea deal is now widely recognized as one of the greatest injustices in modern criminal history.
When Homolka was released, she had served her full sentence. She was free to start a new life and choose where she wanted to live.
Like it or not, she has the right to live her life like any other person without being subject to threats and harassment.
Caligula.
For almost 2,000 years now, Caligula's made people reflect on power and its abuse. The man and the myth, and to be honest, you can't ever quite separate the two.
Ruling the Roman Empire between 37 and 41 AD, Caligula is often depicted as one of the most tyrannical men in ancient history. Of course, most of these accounts were written by his enemies long after his death, so we have to take everything with a grain of salt. But if their words are to be believed, Caligula was a textbook sociopath. He was not only an exceedingly cruel man, but he was also extremely reckless and impulsive, his lavish spending draining Rome's treasury. Perhaps most important of all, Caligula had wild delusions of grandeur, often declaring himself a living god and forcing people to worship him as such. His tyrannical, careless, and increasingly embarrassing behavior resulted in his assassination on January 24, 41 AD.
I think I shall have to resign myself to living forever.
I hope you do.
Pablo Escobar.
Honestly, that's one man I could have shot and never lost a minute's sleep about it.
While he was hailed as a savior-like figure in various areas of Colombia, Pablo Escobar did a lot of heinous things to get in his position of authority. Escobar fits the traits of a sociopath to a T, distributing vast amounts of addictive drugs, mostly cocaine, in order to fund a lavish lifestyle. He didn't care how many lives he ruined with these drugs. He just wanted the money and the power that came with that. In addition, Escobar was known for being extremely manipulative, and he did anything he could to remain in power. That includes murder and even acts of domestic terrorism like bombing an entire passenger plane in order to kill a presidential candidate that was supposed to be on board.
More than 100 people have been killed in a plane crash near the Colombian capital, Bogota. The plane, an Avianca Airlines Boeing 727, was on a domestic flight to Cali.
Genghis Khan.
Many believe his story is simple, that he was the incarnation of evil, a brutal barbarian who butchered millions.
His very name is synonymous with violence. Born with the name Temujin around 1162, he adopted the title Genghis Khan in 1206 and embarked on one of the cruelest expansions in human history. He was basically a James Bond villain, hoping for total world domination and willing to massacre whoever got in his way. Genghis Khan ordered the mass extermination of entire cities, sometimes killing millions in a single campaign, like decimating the Khwarezmian Empire and laying waste to Nishapur. He was also known for being very charismatic, inspiring intense loyalty and admiration among his followers. Throughout most of modern history, Genghis Khan has been regarded as a merciless barbarian.
And how did he transform the Mongol hordes into a ruthless and disciplined fighting machine? An army with revolutionary tactics and ingenious weapons that ultimately stood poised to conquer Europe.
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones demanded loyalty. He controlled everything.
By their very nature, cult leaders often exhibit sociopathic traits, especially when it comes to their manipulative charisma. Jim Jones was no different, attracting a legion of followers through passionate speeches, pathological lying, and promises of a utopian society, which he hoped to establish through Jonestown in Guyana. He also displayed delusions of grandeur, claiming to be the reincarnation of various powerful figures, including Jesus, Gandhi, and even Vladimir Lenin. And of course, his final act was an extreme display of reckless violence, killing over 900 people by poisoning them with cyanide. The Jonestown Massacre is considered one of the most shocking events in modern American history, the unfortunate endgame of a malicious and sociopathic leader.
And part of that, I believe, is because we all are looking for a place to fit into the world. We're looking for love, we're looking for acceptance, and Jim Jones provided that.
Bernie Madoff.
So is this easy money, would you say, that you're making with Madoff?
Easy. Easy peasy.
When it comes to financial manipulation, it's hard to beat the story of Bernie Madoff. Madoff had it all on Wall Street. He ran a multi-billion-dollar company and held sway over the NASDAQ stock exchange. But his own hubris eventually got the best of him.
Madoff was a family-dominated firm, so Bernie was the top of everything. His family had all the key positions.
Madoff confessed to his sons Mark and Andrew that he had orchestrated the largest Ponzi scheme in history through his investment securities firm, swindling investors out of billions. Mark and Andrew then turned on their father and reported him to the FBI, who arrested Madoff on a charge of securities fraud. He eventually pled guilty to 11 felonies and was sentenced to 150 years in prison, where he died in April 2021.
The office has been secured. We have Bernie Madoff in custody, and we just know a lot of money is missing. Our biggest problem was we don't know how it happened.
Richard Scott Smith.
I agreed to talk to you today because I want to get my story out, and I want everybody in the world knowing that I'm not the person that they've claimed me to be.
Fans of Showtime's Love Fraud may recognize the name Richard Scott Smith, as he was the primary subject of the 4-part documentary. Smith was a serial con artist, running numerous online romance scams and ruining the lives of multiple women. These women appear in the documentary, sharing their harrowing stories of being duped and misled.
You know, I may hate him for all these things, but I wouldn't have gotten in so deep if I hadn't thought I loved him.
Smith would use a fake identity and marry his victims, then use their financial information to obtain a line of credit. He would then flee, off to marry someone else, leaving his previous partners both heartbroken and in severe debt. Smith was known to have married at least 10 times before he was arrested at the end of the series.
I'm human too. I've been a victim, Rachel, to things that are not true.
Anna Sorokin.
I'm trying to make my story to be like, oh, I made a mistake, but I'm trying to turn this around without trying to glamorize the mistake itself.
Financial schemes are getting harder by the day thanks to rapid technological advancements, but they still happen. Just ask Anna Sorokin, a Russian-born woman who defrauded various institutions of nearly $300,000. Having emigrated to New York in 2013, Sorokin quickly became a master manipulator.
She doesn't go for the big money right away. It's not like she surrounds herself with, hedge fund moguls. She surrounds herself with cool.
She invented a new identity, Anna Delvey, and forged financial documents to appear like a rich German heiress with access to a multi-million euro trust fund. With these documents, Sorokin secured massive loans, which she used to sustain a lavish lifestyle. However, her deceit was exposed when she duped her friend Rachel Deloche Williams of over $60,000. Williams alerted the police, leading to Sorokin's arrest in a sting operation. She subsequently served 2 years in prison.
I mean, you took advantage of people.
I definitely did, yeah. And I was younger and I learned from my mistakes.
But did you?
I did,
Did
yes.
you learn from those mistakes? I mean, are you not going to do anything like this ever again?
Absolutely not.
Billy McFarland.
But was it more to prove yourself or was it more for money?
It was to prove myself, and once again, I was totally wrong, and I lied to investors to get money.
Called the poster boy for millennial scamming by Vanity Fair, Billy McFarland is widely known as the man behind the ill-fated Fyre Festival. Well, ill-fated isn't the right word, more like manipulative. Taking place in the Bahamas, the Fyre Festival was marketed as a luxury music event with villas, gourmet food, the whole 9 yards.
I think we chose the right island. We got ours for $10 million, freehold land, no lease. We own the land forever.
Visitors paid good money to attend, but upon arrival, they were met with a horribly planned disaster that bore no resemblance to the promised opulence. Tons of lawsuits emerged accusing McFarland of fraud, and he was found guilty on 2 counts. He was ordered to pay $26 million in damages and served 3.5 years in prison.
Before we had the worst luck, I think we had the best luck. And it sounds crazy, but so many things had to go right to make it this big of a failure.
Joe Exotic.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
The Tiger King himself operated the Greater Wynnewood Exotic Animal Park in Oklahoma, known for its prominent display of large cats. And as chronicled in the famous Netflix documentary, he had a fierce rivalry with Carol Baskin, the owner of Florida's Big Cat Rescue. Exotic displayed numerous sociopathic tendencies, which were on full display in the documentary.
All these people think that everybody else in society are abusers but her. I mean, she's a master marketer. I'll give her that.
Despite his purported love for animals, he was continuously alleged to have mistreated those in his park. Not only did he publicly accuse Baskin of killing her missing husband, Don Lewis, he also put out a hit on her, which failed and led to his arrest. Exotic was convicted on charges of animal mistreatment and attempted murder for hire and sentenced to 21 years in prison.
And I get letters from 8-year-old kids to 95-year-old grandmas. And every letter says it's because I was unapologetic, I stood up for what I believed in, and because I'm not ashamed of who I am.
Dorothea Puente.
I used to be a very good person at one time.
Known as the Death House landlady, Dorothea Puente sounds like someone out of a fairy tale. She opened a boarding house in Sacramento and seemed like an upstanding member of the community, donating to various charities and using her boarding house to host AA meetings. She also aided her elderly guests in setting up their Social Security checks. However, this was all part of Puente's grand plan.
This is what we would call the death room. This is where she brought her victims after she had induced drugs into their alcohol.
Throughout the 1980s, the matron killed 9 guests of her boarding house, buried their remains in her yard, and cashed their Social Security checks. It shows that Puente was a maniac who was highly aggressive and driven primarily by her own financial gain.
I spent 15 years as a homicide detective. And in those 15 years, I had seen many victims of homicide, but none of those compared to what I found when I was digging through the yard.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Every person should have the ability to get that type of test.
And speaking of people willing to deceive for financial gain, let's talk about the infamous Elizabeth Holmes. Like Bernie Madoff, Holmes manipulated investors with her company Theranos, which claimed to have revolutionized blood testing with a fancy new machine. However, this machine never actually worked. Holmes not only lied to investors about the company's capabilities, she also lied to her own customers through the machine's bogus results.
What I know is that I've put the best people in place to be able to investigate every aspect of this and ensure that we meet the quality standards that we hold ourselves to.
Theranos raised more than $700 million, and Forbes valued Holmes as the youngest self-made female billionaire in American history. But it all came crashing down when investigators looked into the company and uncovered a massive web of deceit. Holmes was charged with fraud and sentenced to 11 years in prison.
If a female leader can build a company from nothing to something that impacts people's lives every single day, it's like there's nothing we can't do.
Diane Downs.
They kept telling me, if you just remember, they told me I had voids in my memory, that there was 25 minutes of time missing, and that I was hiding something, protecting something.
Called a deviant sociopath by one psychiatrist, Diane Downs gained notoriety for a particularly heinous crime conducted in 1983. On May 19th, Downs shot her 3 children, then wounded herself in the left arm. She subsequently rushed them to a hospital, claiming they had been the victims of an attempted carjacking.
He did not take time to point the gun and shoot me, obviously, because he would have shot me the same way he did the kids.
However, hospital staff was immediately suspicious of her story. 2 of the children survived, but 1 tragically passed from her injuries. Following an official investigation, Downs was arrested 9 months later and convicted largely on the testimony of one of her surviving children. She supposedly committed the acts because the man she was entangled with didn't want kids in their lives. In 1984, Downs was sentenced to life in prison.
To my complete surprise, Diane was non-emotional, not a tear in her eye.
Ted Bundy.
Clearly they're people. Clearly they're flesh and blood, and they have, all the characteristics of human beings, but he would not allow himself to feel those emotions for the victim.
Ask any professional and they will tell you that Ted Bundy was as mean as they come. His own attorney, Polly Nelson, called him, quote, the very definition of heartless evil. Biographer Ann Rule said that he was a sadistic sociopath. Even Bundy labeled himself as the most cold-hearted son of a gun you'll ever meet. Gun is our own word.
If someone's crazy enough and nutty enough to do something like that, I can't stop them. There's nothing I can do.
Bundy was an attractive man who skillfully manipulated his persona to enchant women, often luring them into his car, where he would restrain and kill them. Even after his arrest, Bundy tried to maintain his innocence, weaving lies for lawyers, the media, and visitors alike. However, as the truth closed in, he eventually realized the game was up and confessed to killing 30 people.
I deserve certainly the most extreme punishment society has, and I think society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Charles Manson.
If you hold the negative up to the light, you don't see the light, you just see the negative. So I'm a reflection of your negative, there's no doubt about that, and I can handle that also.
At his 12th parole hearing, Charles Manson was said to have a, quote, history of controlling behavior. That is putting it lightly. Perhaps the most infamous cult leader of all time, Manson was the head of his eponymous family, which gained notoriety in 1969 after killing actress Sharon Tate.
Do you feel blame? Are you mad? Do you feel like
But Tate was just one of 9 victims, most of whom Manson murdered by proxy through his manipulated family members. His motive is still ambiguous, but author Vincent Bugliosi believes that he intended to start a race war. At the aforementioned parole hearing, the panel also indicated that Manson had no remorse for the crimes and harbored a total lack of empathy. He died in prison at the age of 83.
I'm not ready, Your Honor. I need more time.
Can you think of any other examples? Let us know in the comments below.
But we were making more money than we knew what to do with.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.